Welcome to the Resume Storyteller, bringing you interviews with industry experts, regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land you job interviews. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
Folks, I am so excited to have with me evil HR lady, Suzanne Lucas. She spent 10 years in corporate HR, where she hired, fired, managed the numbers, and double-checked things with the lawyers. She left that world to focus on helping other people and companies to be the best she could be. Suzanne is recognized as one of the top influencers in human resources, and you can find her writings and advice all over the internet with her archives at Evil HR Lady. She also coaches job seekers on creating great resumes and helping them to get their careers on track. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining me. I'm super excited. I've followed your writings on, I think, Inc.com, Evil HR Lady, and I'm sure many other places at this point.
Just about everywhere.
So I always thought of you as a journalist. How did you sort of pivot into, tell me about how you got to HR and how you pivoted into the world of journalism and now what you're doing now with helping people to, rewrite their resumes and help them with their job search strategy.
So how I got into HR, I actually have a master's degree in political science, and I was in a PhD program and I hated it. It was not the right place for me. And so I left after I got my master's degree. And then here I am with a master's degree in political science. And I don't know about you, but I've never seen a help wanted, political scientist needed sign,
No, you're right. Same with, I was journalism, but sociology major was my other major. Yeah, not a hot commodity there.
No. And so I was like, okay, I got to get a job. Now what do I do? And so I realized that the reason why I was in the PhD program is I wanted to be a university professor because I love teaching. And so I was like, well, I love teaching adults. Let me be clear. You don't want me teaching your kindergartners. That's not what anybody wants or needs. I'd be like, go away, kids. Mrs. Lucas is busy. But so I thought, well, where can I teach adults? Where is the training function? And then I realized that was in human resources. So I actually went to a temp agency and I said, I will do anything in a human resources department. And so they placed me as an admin covering a maternity leave in an HR department. And I did that for 3 months. And then I moved to a different HR department covering a different maternity leave. And so after that 6 months, I knew somewhat of the language of HR, and I applied for a job for Wegmans. And for those of you that know Wegmans, it's the world's best grocery store.
They just opened one where my oldest goes to college. It is really extraordinary.
Oh, it's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary company. Everything about it is extraordinary. And so I applied for a job there in their HR department as their first HR analytics person. Their very first. And
your poli-sci analytics sort of could.
Exactly. So I learned statistics in graduate school, and my boss said to me, you are completely unqualified for this job, but you are the only applicant that could do statistics. So here you go.
There's accommodation.
And that's how I got into HR. And I was so lucky because Wegmans, they're always in the top 10 of the best companies to work for, the Fortune list. And that's not cheating on their part. They really are good to work for. So I was trained in HR from the ground up by the world's best HR team. So turns out those statistics classes that I hated paid off.
Paid off, right?
Yes. So then the second part of your question is how did I then pivot to journalism?
Yeah, and sharing all of this career advice that you learned or
Yeah.
hiring
So
advice.
I've always loved writing. And I was actually a creative writing minor. See, this is why I really couldn't get a job when I graduated. Master's degree in political science, bachelor's degree in political science with a minor in creative writing. Yeah, it's just not the best marketable.
But it all comes around, right? You just gotta find that right fit, right?
So blogs were starting to be this new thing. And I was like, I've always wanted to be an advice columnist. And
like a Dear Abby?
Dear Abby
or Ann Landers?
Ann Landers, or the true genius of advice, Miss Manners.
Loved her, yeah.
And with the blogs, I realized that nobody could stop me, right? Like I didn't need to get a job to do it. So I just started a blog. And it grew and I got recognized, and CBS News reached out to me and asked if I would start writing for them. And that's how I moved into journalism.
How did you become Evil HR Lady? How did that terminology come about?
Well, that was with the blog because I was working for a very conservative pharmaceutical company. And I knew that there were people in the company that would not like it one bit. And so I knew I needed to write under a pseudonym. And this was my best marketing decision ever, and I didn't think too much about it. But when people think of HR, they always have a negative attitude toward it. And so
because HR is at the front of the hardest times of people's lives, right? It's when they lose their jobs, when they're in trouble.
Exactly. If your boss calls you into her office and you walk in and there's an HR person sitting there, you know that conversation is
it's not for your award and your promotion, right?
Right. So I chose that moniker for my blog way back in 2006, when I needed to be anonymous. And then I've kept with it. Like I said, it was a great marketing move because you're not going to necessarily remember Suzanne Lucas, but you're going to remember Evil HR Lady.
That's right. Wow. Well, I discovered your blog. It's been many, many years ago, but I just a huge fan. So now, I mean, given your work at Wegmans and through your writings and people that write into you, are there sort of a few common challenges that you see facing people testing the job search waters right now, or maybe those trying to make a career change like you made?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely common challenges. And one of the big ones that I see a lot in my career coaching is that everybody thinks everybody else is better than they are. And
that lack of confidence.
It's a serious lack of confidence. And, I was coaching a woman last night, actually, and I looked at her resume and it had this massive project that she had done. I can't even tell you the scale of it. And I said, look at this. This is huge project management, but you never use the word project management. She's like, I don't have a project management certification. And I said, but can you do project management? And she's like, well, yeah, I'm good at it, but I don't have the certification. And I'm like, let's put that, project management phrase on your resume. But she was like, oh, I didn't think I could do that because I don't have the certification. You have that kind of fear. I'm like, this was a massive project. And you did it and you did it successfully. So let's tell people that you did. There's that fear. And then on the other hand, half, you have people that think they are, the best thing since sliced bread, and they aren't. And the problem is that interviewers often get swayed by super confident people rather than really digging in and finding out, can you do this work?
Do you think, or have you experienced in your career where that knack for selling yourself short. Do you see that more with women?
It's definitely more with women. It's definitely more with women. I mean, the statistics all play that out. You know, men will apply for jobs if they have 60% of the qualifications, and women are like, I need 100. And then, of course, interviewers tend to be harder on women as well. So it's like a double-edged sword coming at it, that we eliminate ourselves from some jobs, and then people tend to have higher standards for women. They're scared that we're gonna, I don't know, have a baby in the break room and ruin their
everything. Well, it's interesting what you're saying about the I don't have a certification, because I've asked men that I know that you don't need a certification for certain things, but the guys often say, well, I've been too busy doing the work.
Yeah.
To get it. Doesn't cross their minds.
It doesn't cross their mind. And it wouldn't cross a lot of people's mind. This particular woman, she was just like so concerned about saying, I have this skill, because she didn't have the piece of paper. And I'm like, listen.
Yeah. So you have been,
your eyes closed.
You've been on one side or the other of the hiring table now for many, many years, and you've seen job search evolve. Is there something that you see that people are particularly surprised by, or maybe that has caught them off guard as of late?
I don't know if I've seen anything that's particularly catching people off guard on the candidate side, but on the hiring side, in the past couple of years, they're seeing candidates ghost them, and that didn't used to happen. And there was tons of recruiters and hiring managers ghosting candidates, and they learned that from them. And now
you're seeing the tables turning a little bit.
Those tables are turning. And right now the market is so weird, because there's a lot of positions where they're struggling to find candidates. And then there's a lot of positions where there's hundreds of applicants. Like, there's not anything in between, it seems like.
I know. I feel like it's sort of a bipolar kind of job market. And I remember that with the recession too. At one point, it felt like real estate and banking, it was horrible, but then some other sectors were doing really well. So
yeah. And that's how it is now too. I mean, if you want a restaurant job, they're yours for the picking. And actually, I saw a restaurant job today that was paying wait staff $7.25, which is minimum wage, but not minimum wage for wait staff. So they're paying above, with a guaranteed $200 a shift in tip credit. So I was like, wow, that's $1,000 a week. That's $50,000 a year. They guaranteed them 2 days off and $200 a shift as a minimum. And I was like, that's.
Yeah, I just saw an article. I don't know where I saw it on how restaurants are struggling to hire people back right now.
Yeah.
They're
crazy. Really struggling.
No, it's absolutely crazy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so if you want one, they're yours for the picking. But where are you going to go? You're going to go to this restaurant. I mean, it's in Louisiana. So, but still, you're going to go there where you're guaranteed $50,000 a year. Like, dude, as a waitress.
Yeah. I'd get fired in 2 weeks if I took that job. I'd be the worst waitress.
I would. I could have done it in my youth, but now being on my feet for 8 hours a day, no, thank you. But yeah, it's like,
are you advising through your blog advising hiring managers on how to handle the ghosting process? Because we've gotten lots of advice for job seekers on how to manage it.
I mean, I've told people, but they don't listen. I mean, the way to fix the candidates ghosting, it really requires a unified effort from all recruiters to stop ghosting candidates. Because as long as there's still people doing it, then the job seekers feel justified in doing it. And you're right.
You got to stop the practice altogether.
You got to stop it. And in today's day where we have applicant tracking systems, you can set them up to when you fill the position, it sends an auto email out to everybody that applied to say thanks, but no thanks. And they don't do that. Yeah. And when I talk to recruiters, they're like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm like, no, you're not. This is an automated function that you can choose to turn on or not.
No, you're right. You're right. And you're right. I think that if it started with that, then the rest would follow.
Yeah.
Agreed. So switching gears a little bit, what advice do you have for someone who is at the beginning stages of job search? How do you recommend they get started?
Well, my first question for them is, what is most important to you? Is it the job or the company culture? Because you're going to approach it two different ways. Like if your goal is to be, the CEO of, I don't know, some big Fortune 100 company, you want to be that CEO, then the most important thing for you is the title and the prestige of the company. But if you want to work 40 hours a week, have good work-life balance, go to your kids' soccer games, which I don't know why anybody wants to go to your kids' soccer games. They're so boring. But, you want to do that. The position isn't as important as the company culture is. And so that's the first question that I ask. And either answer is fine. Right. You're not a bad person if you're like, I really value having time with my family or time for my hobbies. And you're not a bad person if you're like, I want to be super wealthy and I want to climb that corporate ladder. Right. Both are fine, but it changes how you do your job search.
That's a really good point. And just that clarity. Do you find people that want both and then you tell them, you can't have both? You have to sort of decide.
And this is something that, I worked in big pharma and I worked in big pharma for a long time. And there were people whose cars were in the parking lot at 6 a.m. And at 8 p.m. And, they were just working all of the time. They traveled all of the time. And they got their rewards sometimes, and then sometimes you get laid off if you do that. That's another thing that I try to tell people, that your company doesn't love you.
No.
And it doesn't matter if you had the top performance rating 3 years in a row. If it becomes the fiscally responsible thing to do to fire you or to lay you off,
they're really great performers lose their job.
Great performers lose their job. And the other time when great performers lose their job, if you're like an assistant vice president and they hire a new senior vice presidents have this thing where they like to bring in their own people. Mm-hmm. So they then clean house. It doesn't matter how awesome you are. You're gone. That's just happens. But you can climb that ladder, but you cannot be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and work a 37.5-hour work week. Yeah. You can't. It's not going to happen. And it's not racist or sexist or whatever is. You can't do it. That's not what it takes to get that job. And it's okay if you don't want that job.
No, you're right. And you're right that there's pros and cons of each. Going with a culture, you might not have the salary you've always dreamt of. There's sacrifices on both sides.
Right. And you can't complain about not having the executive salary if you're not willing to do the work that those people did to get there. And that's just, it's so much work, and it's okay. I'm not condemning it in any way, shape, or form. If that's what you want, go for it. Yeah. But if you don't want that, if you can't want it and not do the work, I mean, you can want it, but you're not going to get it. It just requires.
So let's say they have that clarity and they say, okay, you know what? I really want to have time for my hobbies and my family. how does that job search look different than that person that says, I really want to move up the ladder at a really prestigious company?
So if you are concerned about the culture and having time for your family, then I tell you to do what I call like behind the scenes networking, which a lot of times when people think about networking, they're like, I've got to get to the hiring manager. I've got to get to the hiring manager. And that's how you get, the job interview. Sure. But when you start networking with people at your same level or people that would be at a level below you, that kind of thing, they're going to be really honest with you about the company and the company culture. So they're going to be like, oh, our website says we're family friendly, but that means like they close for Christmas,
Right.
And you can find out what really goes on behind the scenes. Whereas if you go to a job interview and ask the hiring manager is trying to sell the company to you.
That's right.
So they're not going to say, yeah, I'm a terrible manager. I micromanage. I expect 70 hours a week. That never comes out of someone's mouth.
No, I agree with that. I also feel like it's a good idea to have in your network people that maybe left that company, recognizing that there might be some disgruntled people, but if 3 of 5 people sort of say the same thing, good or bad about a company, then you know that there might be something to it.
Exactly. And so with that knowledge, if you can find out things about the company, then you decide whether to target that company on your job search or not. There are companies that I would never, ever want to work for. I like Google. I don't want to work for them. I've heard way too much about them. I don't want to work for them.
Right.
That's not the culture that I want to be in.
That's for you. Right.
Yeah. A lot of people, that's their dream goal. Excellent. Go chase that. Not mine. If someone said, I want the family-friendly, supportive environment, I talked about Wegmans, seriously, best company ever, but it's a grocery store that is open 24 hours a day in some areas until midnight on others. You're going to be working nights and weekends if you're in a store. They're super supportive. They're great pay. They pay above average. They're super company, but it's nights and weekends. If you're in the store, and if you're in corporate, everybody in corporate works in the store from time to time because they want everybody to understand their primary stuff. So you got to know that going into it. Fantastic company, but this is the deal. There's going to be nights and weekends.
Yeah. I agree. And I think it's really important too to be, clear on what you want, but also clear on your deal breakers. Or if you say, I want this, that, and the other, but I absolutely cannot work nights and weekends, then Wegmans would be off the table for you. Yeah. Because that's a deal breaker for you.
Exactly. And you just got to know what those are. And there was a big hoo-ha earlier this year about a bunch of I can't remember which big accounting firm. I want to say it was Goldman Sachs, but don't quote me on that. Where the first year analysts were all upset because they were working these 80-hour weeks. And I was laughing at them. I'm like, you knew that when you took the job.
Well,
they
there is
hire from the top schools.
There is one of those investment firms that is, I guess the people are fleeing, I don't know. And so they are giving some unheard of paid time off and things like that during COVID. But they're, tapping into their softer side, which you don't usually hear about on Wall Street.
No, you don't.
So we talked about how to guide someone who is getting ready to start on a job search. What do you say to that person who is in the middle of a job search and it is really not going well? How do you advise them in terms of sort of regrouping and figuring out what's wrong?
So the question that I have for someone who's doing a job search that isn't going well is, are you getting interviews and then not getting the job, or are you not getting interviews? Because again, there's 2 different ways to approach that. If you're not getting interviews, then let's fix your resume and your cover letter and the companies you're targeting. If you're getting the interviews but not the job, then let's work on your interviewing skills, because those are two very different problems.
Yeah, I agree. So you're saying you've got to really triage the process. And I get people like that all the time that say, well, in an interview, they're not getting this, so it must be my resume. I'm like, I don't think it's your resume, because your resume got you the interview. There's something you're not articulating at that point.
Exactly. If you're getting the interview, then your resume is fine. Now, if you're getting interviews for jobs that you aren't a good fit for, then maybe we need to revamp your resume to make it towards jobs that you're actually going to be a fit for.
Well,
because
that's part of the companies you're targeting too, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's all of those different things that really, there's not a blanket answer for everybody. And that's why, the coaching is helpful, because you can dive into and say, okay, this is what our deal is here.
Yeah. But what I love is that you've sort of pointed out that job search is it's a progressive journey. And so there's your resume, and then there's how you do in interviews, and then there's, negotiations. There's different stages. So you've got to see where the break is in the process.
Right. Exactly.
To figure out what's going on, what's wrong. Yeah. So what do you say to the person? And I get this all the time. I'm sure you do too. People that are looking to make a change, and they have just a super diverse skill set, and they say, well, I could do this role, or I could do that role, and I really am open to anything. What are your thoughts on that? Pros, cons, and
it's fine to be open to anything, but you're not going to find anything when you act like you're open to anything. Companies want to hire people that want this job and not a job. And so if you walk into an interview, or you say in your cover letter, I'm looking to make a change, I'll do anything, you're going straight in the trash, because they don't want someone that wants to do anything. They want someone that wants to be passionate about it. And I think that's a little bit dumb. Like, there's no reason why we all need to be passionate about everything we do every day. I'm just very grateful for the men that come clear out the garbage every week. I don't think they're passionate about garbage, but they do a good job. We don't need to be passionate, but hiring managers want to see this. So you really need to pick, at least for every application, and be able to talk like that's what you really want to do. Like, I have researched this. I really, really, really want to move from marketing into finance. Look, I took these extra classes. I did this, I did that. I was on this project, and finance is where I want to be. And then you can go to your next one and be like, I really want to move from marketing into HR. I did this, I did this project. And that's fine for you. But when you're in that interview and when you're writing that cover letter, you better sell yourself to that. You can go home and think, I don't really know which one I want to do. But when you're applying for the job, or when you're in the interview, you really need to do that.
No, that makes it, people want to feel wanted.
Exactly.
I think that, and I went to high school with, it was an all boys school that had just turned co-ed. And I remember this guy had to ask me to a dance, and he basically told me he asked me because I was a girl. And they needed to start bringing girls to the dances. But yeah, I turned him down. But it's that same thing. You want to feel like at least you're a little bit special, right?
Exactly. It's exactly what they want. The hiring manager wants to feel special, and the candidate wants to feel special. Now, the problem with that is that it ends up with both sides lying to each other. But There you
go. So I want to ask you one of my favorite questions. I'm going to expand it, given that you have experience on both sides of the hiring table. What's something that drives you most nuts when it comes to this whole process? What people do wrong, what's wrong with the process, all of that.
One of the things that drives me super crazy is when recruiters and hiring managers get super judgy about people that have been fired or laid off. I have, in addition to be on the hiring table, I've been on the firing side of things. And I have laid off over 3,000 people in my career. Wow. And the vast majority of those people were in the wrong position at the wrong time. But a lot of hiring managers or recruiters assume if you're unemployed, if you've been laid off, it was because you were bad, therefore I reject you. And that is just false. It is so false. There are so many good people out there that have lost their jobs. And some of them have even been outright fired, not necessarily, laid off. Just because someone gets fired, it doesn't mean that they're a terrible employee. It could mean they had a terrible manager. We all love to share stories about our horrible managers, but somehow when we're hiring, we assume that it's the candidate's fault if they left a position without another job lined up, or if they got terminated. We don't consider that maybe they had a terrible manager.
Do you think that there's been any? You think crises like COVID and like the recession, do you think that those change that mindset in any way?
Somewhat, in that suddenly so many people got laid off, and everybody knew that there was massive amounts of people that got laid off. But I still see it within both my clients and then within the recruiting groups that I'm in. They're like, oh, this is a good candidate. But, you get more of that when you're having 300 applicants for a position, then of course you can pick the cream of the crop. Right. But the people that are employed aren't necessarily the cream of the crop. It's just that somebody else wants them, and that makes them more desirable.
Yeah, no, it's like those, a house on the market that if it's been on longer, you always start wondering what's wrong with the house, but there might be, you never know. You never know what's gone on.
Exactly.
I hope that changes. It drives me. It's funny, I know that on LinkedIn, you actually show up lower on searches you show up below people that are currently hired if you have an end date on in your title or in your experience section, which it feels so fundamentally wrong for a platform that in part is designed to help people. They've done a lot of things to try to help job seekers and unemployed job seekers, and it just seems sort of counterintuitive.
Yeah, it does.
Is there anything that you can recommend that a job seeker do to try to sort of tackle that bias head on?
The one thing is to address it in your cover letter and not try to hide it. One of the things that
call it out.
I don't like is when people try to hide things on their resumes. Like they will put years instead of months and years. So it'll be like, I was in this job from 2019 to 2020. And I'm always like, so was it December 2019 to January 2020? Or was it January 2019 through December 2020? Because that's very, very different, right? And I'm always, people are going to assume the worst when you try to hide things. And, if you got laid off for COVID reasons, say that in your cover letter. Be honest and upfront. Yes, it will take you out of the running in some things, but you're more likely to find a match that is good for you if you are honest.
Yeah, I agree. And I've always felt like people, if there's a potential red flag and you don't address it, people will come to their own conclusions. They'll fill in the blanks and often fill them in wrong. So why not try and control the narrative? And I think you're right. The cover letter is not always read, but when it does get read, it can make a difference. So why not use that real estate for that?
Yeah, and it's a bummer that it's not always red, but I understand why it's not.
Right. No, I agree. And it's a lot. People, when you've got 300 applications, the thought of reading 300 cover letters is daunting.
Yeah, and most people hate writing them as much as recruiters hate reading them.
That's true. What about another sort of sticky topic, which is discrimination when it comes to hiring practices? There's all sorts of isms. There's ageism, sexism, racism. What do you see here? What do you see in Europe where you're located? And how do you advise people to, again, navigate that?
I mean, in my experience, and of course, personal experience, the plural of anecdote is not data, but what I see the most in discrimination is age discrimination, which I think is the dumbest form of discrimination because we're all going to get old.
It's going to hit you're right. No one escapes it.
No one escapes it. But for some reason, people think that it's okay. Like, oh, well, nobody over 35 has any new ideas. Yeah, whatever. Most successful startups are done by people over the age of 40. So forget that. But people have this idea. And so some of the things that I tell people to do is take the dates off of their degrees. And that's becoming more standard. And then, of course, you don't put your jobs going back to 1989. I basically give people a 20-year cutoff, which still puts them in their 40s. But also, what you did at 1989 doesn't really have an impact on what you can do today. It just doesn't.
Yeah, super rarely. Mm-hmm.
It's super, super weird to have that be an important thing. So you don't want to have that on there anyway because of age discrimination, which is something that I see a lot of.
You see that on the hiring side, even when you were recruiting. Yeah. Okay. All right. No, good advice.
I mean, it's just managers, there's a couple of reasons for it that aren't so it's people feel uncomfortable also managing people that are older than they are. And some people feel uncomfortable having a boss that's older than they are. But we need to all get over ourselves.
Yeah. I've never understood that. I want people older and younger than me. Although as I get older, it's getting harder to find older people, but you learn something from each of them. I've never understood, all the isms are stupid, but
they are all stupid.
All right. So let's say you are at a dinner party, if we are finally officially allowed out of our houses. If someone says, okay, I'm going to start job searching, what are one or two things that I really need to have in my back pocket to get started? What would you say?
The first thing you need to have in your back pocket, I think, is you need to figure out your goal. Okay. If you just start creating resumes just purely based on your work history and sending them out, it's not going to go well. You need to really define what it is that you are looking for.
And that goes back to what you said earlier about, do you want culture? Do you want prestige? All those things.
Exactly. Okay. And if once you've got that, then it really helps to narrow you. Like you said, when people are like, I'll do anything, that sounds really good, but it's so hard to find something good. I mean, just think about it. Like when you go to a restaurant that has, 40 pages of menu, the food there is always crappy.
I just get overwhelmed.
Yeah, the food's never very good because the chef doesn't get to pick their specialty and really perfect it. And it's the same thing when you're like, here's my 40 pages of things that I want to do. Well, you're not going to be crafting yourself and marketing yourself. What can you do to make it
right? No, you're not a buffet where someone gets to pick, I want this skill from you and this skill from you. They're not going to take the time to look at everything.
Exactly.
You know. Okay, so figure out your goal is tool number one.
Exactly. And rule number 2 is to make sure that your resume details your accomplishments and not your tasks. So
I'm old. I've been writing resumes since I got out of college back in 1990. And I remember those very first ones. I did focus more on tasks. I probably just didn't know what I was doing, but do you feel like back when that was more acceptable, or it's always been wrong?
It's always been wrong. It clearly works fine for a lot of people because, that's the first thing when someone sends me their resume, is I will go through and I will reword things for accomplishments. And of course, I don't necessarily know what their accomplishments are. So I'll flip it, and then I'll, then leave them the question of, what was the result?
Right.
So you can say that, responsible for employee engagement. Okay, but that sounds fabulous, but did you improve employee engagement? Did you make it worse? So what's
How
the
can
deal?
you show that you actually succeeded in this duty or responsibility? Yeah, no, agree. Okay, so to close this out, so you have your blog, you have your business where you are supporting people with job search, writing their resumes. As we head into the second part of 2021, what is next for you?
Right now, I'm really growing my resume and coaching business. Matter of fact, I launched my coaching business officially last week. I've always done it on the side without publishing it. And I got really backed up. So I have a waiting list now. And I am working on 2 books, one for HR people and one for job seekers. So I'm excited about both.
Wow. Do you have working titles yet or not yet?
I don't have a working title for the HR one, but the working title for the job seekers is How to Find a Job When You're Just Average. Because most of us are average and nobody likes to admit it, but we are. There you go. You're average. I'm average.
I'm okay with average. So if someone wants to learn more about you or wants your help, I've got your evilhrlady.org website. I've also got your LinkedIn URL. Are those the 2 best places to learn more about you, find out when your book's getting ready to launch, and get in touch with you?
All of those are good. There's a third place. I have a Facebook group that's called Evil HR Lady, and it's open to HR people and then anybody interested in HR business type things. The thing that we ask is that if you would like to join, we have a question to enter. You have to give us a good answer to that question. And if you don't answer it, we will not let you in. Even if you're like, the queen of HR, you're not coming in if you don't answer our question. And that's a really great group for both HR people and for people that have or want jobs, because you can ask a question and you'll get answers back from really experienced people. It's a great group.
Oh gosh, that's great.
Those 3 areas.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, thank you for taking the time. It's a Friday evening for you. So I again, so appreciative of your insights and your expertise. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Anytime.
You've been listening to The Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's online skim hiring and decision makers, please visit www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.